Firestore is amazing, but pagination is difficult and not straightforward. In this lesson, let me show you how to paginate Firestore documents like a pro. What's up guys, welcome back to end-to-end web development. In this lesson, I'm going to be covering pagination with the Collection-Proxy and Firestore. If you didn't watch my first video on the Collection-Proxy, I'll leave a link and you can check it out. But that is necessary to understand what's going to be happening in this video, because in the previous video we covered setup and configuration and basic CRUD operations. So when you get a chance to go ahead and check it out. So for this one, we're just going to go over what we have going on in here briefly. So we're creating a user document that we're going to use for adding users to the users collection. And we're taking the collection proxy approach where we're pulling in the collection, we're setting the collection name to the users collection, and we're applying a set data here so that we can set a default reactive object on our proxy. And this is necessary to make the proxy reactive in Vue so that we can just use it in our template and maintain reactivity. We're also creating a proxy for the users collection where we're going to be pulling in all the users. So we're using the proxy to set the collection name to users. And again, we're setting data to a reactive array, which is going to hold all the users that we're pulling in from the database. And that's going to help us to maintain reactivity so that we can display them in our template. So in our form here, we just have a basic list of users, and then we have some pagination controls that we're going to use to paginate forwards and backwards and start and end. Then we have our user form here, which is going to allow us to plug some fake user information in the system. So my add button here is tied in with Faker, where I'm populating a fake user and then I can create. So that just gets me up and running quickly so I can create a bunch of users. So let's get started. We're going to hop back over here, and the first thing I'm going to do is to pull in the unmounted from Vue, and then I'm going to use it right here. So when the app mounts, we want to go out and pull in all the users from the users collection. So I'm going to call users collection.get documents. And that should go out and pull in all our users. So let me perform a refresh here and see what we get. So we can see we have no records, right? So let me check my database and we can see that database is empty. So we need to implement this button so that we can go ahead and create some users to start filling our data. So let me scroll down to my create button, and I'm going to add a click handler. And for this, I'm going to be using a batch from Firestore. So let me go ahead and pull that in. So that needs to be coming from the right place. So Firebase Firestore. And then this is a right batch. So we got that, and then we want to await. Creation of user document. And we're going to apply the batch to that. We need to make this function async to commit our batch. All right, let me run that. So now I can press my add button and say create. And we see that we're creating a new user here. However, there's a problem because I created that user, but my form is still filled. So I can't go ahead and create more users. So that means I need to do something here. So I'm gonna hop over here, and to fix that, we can reuse the user document and call the replace data. So that's gonna allow us to clear out any data that's in that proxy. So go ahead again, add user. We see our second user is created and our form is clear, and we could go ahead and add more users. However, there's a problem. We can see that we're overriding the last user that was created. So this is happening because the proxy has a default ID, and once you create that record, we are reusing the proxy, so that means that we need to reset that ID. So to generate a new ID on the user document, we can call the setDoc with no params, and that's gonna generate a new ID for us. So let's go ahead and try that again. So we go ahead and add user. Our third user is created, and if we try add user again, we can see now we're adding individual users. So let's go ahead and populate the system with a bunch of users here. And we can see what the problem is now. We are trying to paginate this data instead of having everything coming in from the database in one shot. So let's go ahead and implement pagination. So to start out with that, we just need to go to the Collection-Proxy and pull in the pagination class. And then we're going to use that class on our get documents call. So we just need to say new pagination. And we want to paginate by 3 rows. So if I refresh on that, we can see that we're having another error in here. So if you've ever used Firestore or used their version of pagination, which is done using the start at and the end before and those functions, you know that you have to import everything from the library. So for the Collection-Proxy, there's no difference. Nothing is automatically imported. We have to import it from Firestore and then provide it to the Collection-Proxy. So let's go ahead and do that. It's saying that we're missing the limit. So let's go ahead and pull that in from Firestore. Then we're going to apply that limit to our users collection, because that's the one that's requesting that data right now. So to add a configuration to this, I just need to call the setConfig, and then we're going to provide that with the limit. If I go ahead and refresh here, we see that we have another error. Now it's asking for the query. So let's go ahead and provide that. All right, so if I do that, now we can see that we're paginated by 3. So the reason why I'm going through and having it throw these errors is so that you guys can be familiar with the process and see what is needed to bind all these calls together. However, we're doing this in our component. This registration can be applied globally. So if I go ahead and refresh again, we can see our errors being thrown because we're no longer providing those functions here. We can go to our global config. And if you remember from the last video, this is configuration that was pulled in from a gist. So all we need to do is come in here and add the new functionality. So we need to pull in our limit and our query, and then we should get that working again. So if you wanted to do a comprehensive configuration, you could come in this file and import all the functionality that you need from Firestore and then just embed it into this setup. And then you wouldn't need to be providing these functions throughout your application, because this config here is statically initialized, meaning it's available throughout your whole app. So once you go to the entry point of your application and you pull in that file, you're now using all the features of that Collection-Proxy, right? And then you could provide any type of additional functionality or overrides on the instance config. So this is the instance config, and then we have the static config in our initialization file here. So I'll go ahead and roll this back. And we should still be throwing our errors. And I'll just go ahead and repopulate our limit and our query. All right, so we're pulling in these records. However, we have no control over them. We can't paginate through the data. So I'm going to go ahead and implement this next button right now. So if I go and find that button, I'll see it right here, and I'll add a click handler. All right, and all we need to do to paginate using the collection-proxy is to call the collection. So users collection.next. All right, so you see there's an error here because we don't have full TypeScript support, but everything should still work. So now I'll go ahead and do a refresh. I see my 3 records coming in, and I want to go next. And we can see now we're throwing additional errors. It's saying that we need a start after. So let's go ahead and pull that in. And we're going to apply that. We'll go through the whole process here. So now we see that we're paginating forwards. All right, great. So I'll go ahead and I'll implement the prev pagination. So let's go ahead and find that button. And that's right here. And we'll go through the same process, which is to add a click handler. So we'll call users collection.prev. Another refresh. And if we go next, we can next through the data. And if we press prev, we're seeing that we need to pull more stuff in. So we need to go and grab our end before. Bind that to our proxy. Let's see what else is going to come up here. So now we're seeing we need a limit to last. And we need an order by. So just remember, if this is all globally initialized, you don't need to specify them in here. It will be available throughout the whole application. So you can choose the approach that works best for you. So we have our order by setup. We have everything now configured. So let's go ahead and check this out again. And if we go forwards and backwards with pagination, and you see we didn't have to do much. So what's happening here now is that we're over paginating because we have no constraints to identify when we're at the start or the end of our documents. So to fix that, you could either implement a disable on the button, so identify when you're at the end of your collection and disable the buttons, or you can apply an option to the collection proxy, to the pagination here. So that option is empty, and you set that to false. So we're telling the pagination that it should not empty out our collection. So it will always keep you on the last page or the first page. So let's go ahead and test that. So now I refresh, and if I paginate forward, you see that I'm at the end of my pagination, but it's not emptying out my records. And I can paginate back to start, and it's not going beyond the start point. Let me add another document in here. All right, so again, paginate forward, and we can see this is our last document, and it doesn't allow us to go beyond. And if we paginate backwards, again, we're at the start of our collection. All right, next thing I'm gonna do here is to implement the end pagination. Right, so we're gonna be able to paginate to the end just by pressing this button right here. So let's go and find that button. And we could see that right here. I'll go ahead and add a click handler. And we'll call users collection dot end. Right, so if I go ahead and I refresh and I go to the end, we can see we're throwing errors again. So this is saying collection size required when calculating end queries. So for you to perform an end query, you'll need to know the size of your collection. So before, this was a big problem because Firestore never provided any functionality to calculate the size of your collection. But recently they have added aggregate queries, so we can go ahead and use those. And those are already a part of the Collection-Proxy, so we'll use it through the Collection-Proxy. So let's go back in here and see where we can find that. So I'm going to create a pagination object so I can keep things together. So set my rows in here to 3, and then I'm going to create a paginator. And that I'm going to set to a Collection-Proxy, and we're going to have it count the user's collection. So I'm creating a Collection-Proxy that I'm going to be using to count the user's collection. So let's go ahead and use those. So I'll replace this to pagination.rows. And to provide the count to pagination, we have to provide that through the size. And the size we can set to a Collection-Proxy. So let's go ahead here. I have to make a call to the Collection-Proxy to get the collection aggregate. So I'm going to have to await that. So pagination.paginator, get collection aggregate. And I want to store the aggregate in a size property. And the aggregate that we need is count. And I just got to go ahead and pull that in from Firestore. And I need to make my function here async. All right. So what's happening here, I created a pagination object, which is going to hold my rows and my paginator. My paginator is going to be a Collection-Proxy that's going to be counting the user's collection. So then I'm setting my rows count from my pagination object, and I'm setting the size of my collection from the paginator on my pagination object. And we just need to call the collection aggregate and get the count and store that count into size. So that's going to provide that value to the pagination, and that's how it's going to know how many documents are in the collection. Let's go ahead and test that out, see where we're breaking down here. So I go ahead and do a refresh, and it says that we need to get aggregate from server. So another function that we need to go pull in from Firestore. So got the aggregate from server, and I need to apply that to my counter, my paginator. So I'll set the config, to the get aggregate. So now if I refresh, I see we have documents coming in. So let's try and see if we can paginate to the end, and it works. So I can move back to the start, I can next forward, or I can just paginate to the end. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and add my document count right here. So let's go find that area. So I'm gonna use the paginator, paginator.get data, and I want to access the size, and then we can see the size of our collection showing up here. Let's go ahead and do a refresh, paginate forward. Nice. So I want this size to be reactive. Whenever I create new documents, I want to see that size incrementing. And this is one of the things I don't like about the whole aggregate implementation from Firestore, is that they did not do it like how they do for documents, where you can have a snapshot that you listen to. It would be nice if you could count your collection and then listen to documents getting added or removed from that collection and get an update on your count. But that's not the case, so we have to do this manually. So let me go back in here, and we're gonna need to reuse this function here, so to get the aggregate. So I'll just create a function so that we can reuse this. So we'll call this users collection count. And I'll go ahead and implement that function here. All right, and then I can reuse it in my creation logic. So down here where I'm creating the user, I'm replacing the data. I'll just call for users collection count. So now if I add new documents, we should see the count going up, but that's not happening. So you see now we're at 12. So the reason why that's not working is because we have our paginator, which is counting the user's collection, but we did not make it reactive. So this is where I need to call set data, and I need to set that to a reactive object. So with that, we should now have reactivity on our count. So if I go ahead and I add, we can see our count going up. Great. So the next thing I want to implement is the start functionality. So we can paginate forward, but we can't paginate back to the start. So I want to go ahead and implement that. All right, so I'll go ahead and find that button, which is here, and add a click handler. So we're going to call users collection.start, and that should do it. So if we go to the end, and we can go right back to the start. So we have full pagination set up on here. We can paginate next all the way to the end. We can paginate previous all the way to the start, or we can go all the way to the end or all the way to the start. And we can add new documents, and we're updating our count. So the final thing that we're going to do here is to be able to delete documents and see our count getting decrement. So now let me go and find the delete operation, which is happening right here. And again, we're going to add a click handler. I'm going to use a batch here. Wait. So the user document that delete, and we're calling that on a batch. So I need to make this function async. And whenever we delete a document, we also want to make sure that we're resetting the ID, because you don't want to create a new document after deleting a document and have that new document have the same ID as the document that you deleted. So after creating or after deleting our document, we want to call the user document and call the set doc. So we don't need to call replace data here because we're deleting the document. The data is already gone. So we just need to call set doc so that we generate a new ID. And after we do that, we want to recount our collection. So with that, let's see how it operates. So we have 16 users in here right now, and I can go in and start deleting users. So we're seeing that the delete operation kicked off, but nothing is happening, right? So that's because we are not providing any identification to our delete method here. We don't know what record needs to be deleted. So if we look in on our template here, we can see that we're accessing the user's collection in a V4, and we have access to each document, which has the ID and the paths and everything that you need. So all I have to do is apply a data to my delete operation and just set it to the current document that's being deleted. So if I refresh again here and I go ahead and delete, we can see that we deleted that document and our count got updated. So that's it for this video with pagination, guys. We have a lot more coming in. We're gonna do some audit trailing and all, and just a lot of different videos on how to effectively use the Collection-Proxy. So make sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you guys have any use cases that you want me to explore. Just let me know, and check me out on GitHub. Thank you.